struck with and weather the barren empty sides. No oasis here to see. The sin is singing deathless words to me. Can you help me as I'm starting to burn? Too many doses, I'm starting to get an attraction. My confidence is leaving me on my own. No one can save me, and you know I don't want the attention. I just too many sights. The rarely tired lights will take me to new heights. My hand is on the trigger, I'm ready to ignite. Tomorrow might not make it, but everything's alright. Mental fiction, follow me. Show me what it's like to be set free. You help me as I'm starting to burn. Too many doses, I'm starting to get an attraction. My confidence is leaving me on my own. No one can save me, and you know I don't want the attention. So sorry you're not here. I've been saying too long, my vision's so unclear. Now take a trip with me, but don't be surprised when things aren't what they seem. Caught here in a fiery blaze, won't lose my will to stay. These eyes won't see the same after I flip today. Sometimes I don't know why we'd rather live than die. We look towards the sky for answers to our lives. We may get some solutions, but most just passes by. Don't want your absolution, 'cause I can make it right. I'll make a beast out of myself. Get rid of all the pain and fear. Can you help me as I'm starting to burn? Too many doses, I'm starting to get an attraction. My confidence is leaving me on my own. No one can save me, and you know I don't want the attention. So sorry you're not here. I've been saying too long, my vision's so unclear. Now take a trip with me, but don't be surprised when things aren't what they seem. I've known it from the start. Oh, these good ideas will tear your brain apart. Scared that you can follow me. I'm too weird to live, but much too rare to die. Your eyes are shining, it's a heavenly glow. It seems you're one of us now, don't you know? jealous. Envy is a sin. My wings searching from the shade that's flowing in. This is perfection on the highest level. Only God can criticize. Bow down and watch me shine my halo. It's time to realize the new queen has arrived. So call your spirit guides, 'cause angels never die. All your prayers, no need look fun elsewhere. Oh no, I'll touch your soul. Together we rise across the globe, oversee mountains, our spirits flown. Look inside you, and is there all along? Angels, they never die, never die. Perfection on the highest level. Only God can criticize. Bow down and watch me shine my halo. It's time to realize the new queen has arrived. So call your spirit guides, 'cause angels never answered all your prayers, no need to find elsewhere. Oh no, I'll touch your soul. Together we rise across the globe, oversee mountains, our spirit is flown. Look inside you, home is there all along. In light it calls us home. With me you'll never be alone. I'm the answer to all your prayers, no need to find elsewhere. Oh no, I'll touch your soul. Together we rise across the globe, oversee mountains, our spirit is flown. Look inside you, home is there all along.
Hello, and welcome to the Burst Radio Live Lounge with me, your host, Adam Walter, bringing you live music as well as fascinating interviews with a plethora of highly talented musicians. And this could not be truer than today. I am joined by a guest described by Nightlife magazine as captivating the experimental underground. I'm delighted to be joined on Zoom with Bristol hyperpop artist Mouse to discuss many things, including her process and her upcoming debut EP, due to be released in February 2021. Mouse, it's a pleasure to have you with me today. Welcome to Virtual Live Lounge.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. So I wanted to start by asking you a little bit about the set that you sent in. It was absolutely great. I particularly enjoyed Angels Never Die, which is from the new up-and-coming project. And I was wondering how you're feeling about the release of your debut project, and if there's a bit of a sense of relief, obviously, as you've been working at this for such a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting one because I think that it will be a real moment for me where I'm kind of revealing my true self in a way, because this is the most authentic piece of work I've ever made, and I've never released a body of work before. but I'm so happy that it's taken me the length of time it has, because if I'd have done it a year ago, when I said I probably would try and do it, it honestly wouldn't have sounded the way it has.
Mm.
2020 has absolutely impacted the way my music sounds for sure, and it's really made me understand that there is no point in being literally anybody else apart from me. So it is the most authentic version of me in musical form, just kind of there. So people might not even like it because it's so different to what I've done before, but whatever.
That's great, and I like the fact. Obviously, you mentioned about their putting your like your soul, bearing your soul almost into the
For
work.
sure.
Do
Yeah.
you find music quite a cathartic process, something that really helps you relieve emotion, especially obviously with the frustrations and difficulties that, as you say, 2020 has brought on?
Mm. Yeah, definitely. For me, whenever I write, lyrics is what always comes first, and I will literally just uncap my pen, get my notebook out, and just let myself like free write. So I don't think about it too much, and I think that for me, the best art comes from that when you don't overthink it. And most of the songs on this EP were written in like 20 minutes or under, because they're just a verbalization of an emotion in that moment, and I try not to change things too much afterwards. So for me, yes, music is super cathartic because it is all about that instantaneous feeling and just exploring it on paper and getting it out.
Yeah, definitely. I particularly enjoyed what you said there about obviously not overthinking the creative process because obviously slightly different fields, but Ricky Gervais said he comes up with his best stand-ups and his best sitcoms, etc., when he's not trying to think of ideas and when he takes his time off. So I really enjoyed what you
Yes.
said about that. And I think you can tell on this album from the songs I've listened to that you are really having fun with it and it is a very natural, like you say, release and creative process. I wanted to briefly ask you about how you got into music, and there's a really great story on your website about how you were given advice by your music teacher called Dan Tompkins, and how this helped you start releasing your music and getting it out online. Could you tell us a bit about that story?
Of course, yeah. So Dan is the lead singer of a progressive metal band called Tesseract, and I grew up absolutely loving metal. I thought pop music was really lame. I really did think that, yeah, I didn't think I'd ever want to make pop music for sure. But as I grew up, it just became absolutely everything that I loved because it's so fun. Um, but yeah, he basically said it's really important, and what I wish I'd done sooner is create an online presence. Even if you are just documenting your progress as a vocalist or as a writer, just start now, because I wish that I had done that in the beginning, because I would have been able to cultivate a wider audience and have, progressive growth over time. So even if you don't want to be a singer, even if you don't want to, release anything, just have it as a kind of like a visual diary of your progress as a vocalist. And I took his advice, and actually it gave me a lot of accountability, because although I was learning publicly and showing that progress, in a way, I think that's almost one of the best ways to learn, because you are open to feedback and you're opening yourself up to feedback, which is pretty good practice, I think, when you start to do more publicly, and some people will have opinions that you don't want to hear, or that you don't like or whatever, and it's really good practice, I think, to have that public space for learning. Um, so I think, yeah, I'm really glad I took that advice, because, hey, I mean, it's turned into something that I never ever thought it would ever. And yeah, that's a great thing to have begun. So yeah, I'm really grateful for that.
Definitely, and I think it's really important, as you say, to not obviously factor in too much what other people think, because obviously, a lot of the time people say you can't do something based on the limitations they set for themselves. And I think obviously something that is great about your music, as you say, is that it is very personal, it is very individual, and I think you should obviously, like you say, focus on just getting yourself out there, getting your music out there, and working on it, which is something you've done, and as you say, is clearly paying off. Um, Sort of going back to like your story there with Dan, so it feels almost like a twist of fate. Do you think you would have gone down the route of pursuing music if that hadn't have happened?
I think that's a great question, and honestly, no. Um, well, oh, it's so hard to answer that because it was always something that I wanted to do, but it was one of those things that I never would have anticipated um, me actually doing, actually it actually happening in the real world, not just in my head. And I think that a big part of that is because of the skills or the lack of skills that I had when I first started, particularly where it comes to production as well as singing and writing. The whole thing, to be honest with you, I learned a hell of a lot throughout throughout the first few years. So I would definitely say it was really important. And yeah, like you say, I'm really not sure I would be doing it in a serious way if I hadn't have just opened myself up to being on social media publicly as a vocalist. So yeah, I think it was really important.
Can you remember when you started posting, obviously your clips and your videos, sort of the emotions? Did that create any sort of stresses or worries initially?
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, first things first, like when I first started online, I was sure that this project, if it was going to go anywhere, was actually going to be like a punk band, which is fascinating because obviously it's nothing like that now. And I'm glad for that. But yeah, the aesthetic was completely different. All the photos were black, all the and photos were black and white. And it was very arty and like, I hate the word hipster, but it was very like that sort of thing, which is yeah not my aesthetic at all now. Um, but yes, in terms of the emotions, it was definitely very nerve-wracking. I would describe myself as an introverted extrovert. I love talking to people and meeting new people, and I love performing and being that center of attention. But I need my time alone to kind of recharge after doing that. So for me to sing a video, record a video of me singing and just stick it up online did take quite a lot of courage in the beginning. Now I don't care, but back then it definitely did. Yeah.
I can imagine. And obviously, something we've spoken about briefly during this interview is challenges. Now, obviously, 2020 has had a lot of challenges for a lot of people. And I was just wondering how that's affected your relationship with your music and obviously your process of making music. What challenges has obviously lockdowns and isolation brought on for you?
I think challenges was definitely so I had a couple of festivals booked and shows booked. This is late spring, early summer sort of time. And I thought they were going to go ahead like normal. And in January, I played my first show with my backing dancers, so it was a real big deal, and it was a real changing moment in terms of how I did my live show. But to suddenly have that taken away after that climactic moment in January was just really unbelievable, to be honest, because not only is that a loss of income as well, but it's a loss of development opportunities for me. Um, and a lot of like being able to play new songs live and just test them because that is such an important part of all of this. And I've gone to a number of conferences and things and discussions on it over Zoom over the past couple of months. And there's a lot of people in the music industry saying that there's going to be a gap in up and coming artists at the moment because they don't have the opportunities to road test new material and things like that, which I think is a really important consideration. But personally, yeah, I did find it hard because I just have to hope that the people who hear my EP will like these songs because they haven't heard them yet. So that's quite weird. It would have been nice to have had the opportunity to play them and see how the reaction went and then decide whether I wanted to keep them or bin them. But oh well.
Obviously, we've mentioned the new EP, and I'm sure people will love it because the extracts I've heard have been, as I've said, really, really great. This was your first time taking on a production role as well with your work, if I'm not mistaken. And I was just wondering how you find the process of producing.
Yeah, sure. I'm really glad you asked this because I think that it needs to be spoken about a lot more, particularly when it comes to girls producing, because unfortunately so rare. And it shouldn't be, but it is. So I've co-produced the other singles that I put out. This is in 2018, early 2019. Those singles were co-produced. Because to be honest, I just didn't have much confidence.
Okay.
And I lacked speed when working as well. And there's nothing more frustrating, producers will understand, of hearing a song and hearing a sound in your head and not being able to quickly reproduce it on the
Right.
computer to kind of get the computer to do what you want it to do. That's so frustrating. But fortunately, lockdown has just meant that I've been so much quicker, which has been fantastic because I've had all the time to do nothing else, sort of thing. Um, so in terms of my producing, the first track that I produced myself and mixed was Touch, which was featured on the Illegal Data compilation, which came out late 2019. Um, but this EP is mainly produced by me, which is it's really exciting. And it's a weird one because I don't know whether people will necessarily know that or assume that when they hear it. So it's something that's really, I feel it's really important to tell people, as beggy as it might sound, like, oh, by the way, I produced that as well. Because people probably don't think that I would do that because of my agenda, which is a shame.
No, definitely. When obviously mentioning production and mastering music, obviously a lot of students, as this is a student radio station, will be watching this who want to get into music.
Yeah.
Is there a software like Logic or something that you use and that you would recommend for people looking to get started?
Of course, yes. So Logic is what I use, but it is Apple only. So it depends what computer or laptop you're working with. If you are using an Apple product, then they all pretty much come with GarageBand now as standard, which is like the kind of beginner's version, a kind of yeah, beginner's version of Logic. It does what you might need it to do to a certain extent, and that's amazing for free. I think Logic is about 140 quid, something like that.
Mm.
But if you can afford it, it's the best thing. And then aside from that, YouTube tutorials. You know, if you can kind of verbalize what you're looking to do, if you can type it out, then you're sorted. Yeah, YouTube is your best friend basically when it comes to learning for sure.
100%, 100%. It's incredible what you can learn to do on the internet these days.
Yeah.
Um, so obviously we've spoken a bit about your process of songwriting, and you've said it's something that comes very naturally to you when you're, like you say, when you're not trying to force ideas.
Yeah.
Is there a point, or has there been a point throughout your journey in music where you had sort of a spell of creative block and you just couldn't write anything at all?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I would say, to be honest, half and half with 2020 because there have been weeks on end where I'm currently going through it now actually, where I just have nothing to say. And it's not for lack of emotion, it's just sometimes emotions can be so overwhelming, I think, that you don't even know where to begin when it comes to
Mm.
verbalizing them. And that can be just as much of a stumbling block as not knowing how you feel or what to say. But yeah, that's it's so challenging. Um, and so many artists and writers will go through that, and there's nothing really to determine how long it will last or when it will end, that sort of thing. And equally for me, nothing in particular which can kick it off either. um, it's so random, for want
Mm.
of a better word, that yeah, it can be really, really difficult. But I think for me, making sure that I'm listening to a wide variety of music and reading a lot of books really helps. Just kind of ingesting other people's words,
Mm.
that can kind of like start to shake the dust off a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we had on the show my cousin actually, who's a music producer,
So
and he was saying when he struggles, like he has creative block, one of the key things to do is to not, like you said there, not to try and force ideas because, like as you
yeah,
said, it's just when they don't come. And obviously, something you mentioned there is taking inspiration from other people's work, so like say books and other songs, etc. Is there someone in the music industry, or as you were coming into music, someone who really inspired you?
yeah, definitely. I mean, I get my inspiration from a lot of different sources. For example, there are some orchestral tracks on my EP. Um, And I would say that growing up as a metal fan and as a fan of heavy music, where there was so much theatre and drama about a lot of the certainly the bodies of work, as opposed to standoff singles. Um, for me, like creating that story was really important. So bands like My Chemical Romance and Avenged Sevenfold were so important to me growing up because it kind of it showed me that music is so much more than just one product. It can be a real story. But I would say taking it to now, my favorite artist at the moment is Rina Sawayama. Um, I think she's absolutely phenomenal because the songs that she writes are about really deep personal subjects. Um, and there aren't many artists, particularly in the pop realm, who are actually um, touching on these subjects of like capitalism and family and like um, uh, yeah, identity. And I think that she's great, and also she perfectly combines like pop and rock and hip hop and things, New Jack Swing in a way that works really really seamlessly, which again is really individual and really unique at the moment. So yeah, I think she's awesome.
Now, this is the final question, but it's a big, big question, which is why I like to finish on this one. And I think it'll be fascinating to get your perspective on it, obviously, as you're like on your rise in terms of your career right now. And that is, how would you like to be remembered?
I love this question. And you're right, it is a big one. I think it's such a great question to ask though. Um, oh man, I want to be remembered as somebody who, this is gonna sound so cheesy, but whatever, I'm gonna say it. Someone who just spoke from the heart all the time and wasn't afraid to be themselves. I mean, the reason I am called Mouse is because I'm 4'11" and I decided to own my my height or lack thereof. And I really want to inspire other people to recognize their insecurities as not something which is necessarily a bad thing. It just makes you who you are, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. So I would say that's probably how I want to be remembered for sure.
A great answer. Hopefully we'll all be remembered in a similar light.
Of course, yeah. Who wouldn't want to be remembered like that? Yeah.
Exactly. Before we finish up, would you like to tell people where they can find you on social media and find your music?
Yeah, of course. So my website is shescalledmouse.com, and I'm at She's Called Mouse on literally every social platform you can think of. And yeah, you can find me on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Music, wherever you usually stream music, you can find me.
Mouse, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you for joining me. And thank you to the Burst audience for watching. See you soon.